Okay, so what we're going to do is talk a little bit about Netbeans, getting the ball rolling with Netbeans as your OIM WebLogic development environment. So we basically have here a slightly customized version of Oracle's pre-built Java Developer VM. I think the changes I made to it was, of course, I put WebLogic on it because theirs comes with Glassfish, and I put SQL Developer on it. I can't remember if this actually has a database on it though, but we can find out. Okay, doesn't look like it's running, so I'm guessing there isn't one, but SQL Developer is on here, so you can connect to one and use it if you need be. Okay, so first thing we're going to have to do is set up Netbeans to talk so that it knows WebLogic is its server. So we're going to start the WebLogic admin server. Okay, installing WebLogic will be something you'll have to figure out on your own. It's really not that hard. Okay, so we have WebLogic running. Now we're going to go into Tools, Servers. We're going to add a server. We're going to tell it it's an Oracle WebLogic server. It seems to have found it. All we got to do is give it a password, whatever it was that you set it when you installed it, and then voila, we have access now to our WebLogic server. Okay, so now a couple other things we have to do is in order to do so with WebLogic tied in, we could pretty much do web services. We could do, you know, and with Netbeans we could do any kind of jar related application or any kind of web app. One of the nice things about Netbeans compared to some of the other ones is that it can build a deployment for a jar type deployment. You know, so in other words, when you do a clean build, you'll end up with a dist folder that has the jar created from your code plus a lib folder that has all the dependencies that you've specified in your libraries. So when you use Netbeans, you can specify the libraries that you're going to need in order to compile your application. Okay, so now since this is a Linux machine, it's going to be slightly different than how I have it set up on my Windows machine, but not really a lot. You'll see how cool it is here in a second. So what I did was, on my Windows machine I have something called c:/Java libs. Okay, so what I did was I copied that over to this Linux box. Okay, now let's go in and take a look at what's there. Okay, so there's a couple XML files. We'll talk about those in a second. We're mostly interested right now in the directories. Okay, so we have 11g libs, 11g ext, and the OIM client. So let's see what we have here. Okay, now this is basically the lib folder from the OIM install. Okay, and of course this is the ext from the OIM install, and this is the client jar that you need in order to make a client connection. Of course, you won't need to make that client connection if you're writing an adapter. So, but all these are here. Now, the other thing you'll notice now is that there's also an XML file pretty much matching these. Well, this one is basically a smaller piece of this, where it's only including Apache Commons, so you might only want Apache Commons and not necessarily the entire OIM client, but or the OIM ext libs, but at least you're using the same ones that OIM is using if you plan on deploying there. So, and they are pretty new, so you could, it's not that big a deal to just use those rather than go download, whatever the latest and greatest is today. So, and I also have a log4j one, which is basically using log4j that's in here. So you see that's this maps to that, this maps to that, and then this maps to that, and then there's a couple extra ones which are using the bits and pieces of this. Okay, so now I copied this from my Windows box. I also copied these XML files from the Windows box, and you'll be able to see that. Okay, there's the dead giveaway right there. Okay, so now what we want to do is Netbeans keeps these XML files in a specific location. Okay, I'm not exactly sure where that is on Linux. I'm sure it's in my home directory somewhere. So what we'll do is we'll create a library, a dummy library. Okay, and then we'll add some jar files to it, and there's all the, just so happens. Okay, it doesn't really matter what we put in it because we're going to delete it anyway. We just need to know where Netbeans is putting it. Okay, so what we'll do here okay, so there it is. This is where Netbeans put the XML file for that lib it just created. You kind of have to create, if you don't create any of your own custom libraries, it'll never create this folder, so you kind of have to create one before you can find out where it's putting them. Okay, so now we can go into there. Okay, now I probably want to, it's alright, we'll leave it running. Be interesting to see what happens anyway. So we'll copy all the XML files to here. Okay, so now what we have to do Okay, so what we're going to do here is replace C colon with home, because that's where everything will be. Okay, now we'll go to the libraries again, and we'll delete our junk library, and lo and behold, there are our new ones. Okay, with everything intact. Okay. Alrighty, so that was just a little, I guess, no, we already set that up. So what we've done is we basically, you've already installed a copy of Netbeans 691. That's the other key here. We're using 691. So you have already installed 691. You've already installed a copy of WebLogic. I think in this case it's 10.3 something. So you have a WebLogic install. You have a Netbeans install. You now have the library set up for building an OIM application. Okay. The other nice thing about doing these libraries is that when you create a project in Netbeans and you add these libraries to your project, let's say you're building an adapter, and your adapter, of course, is going to need to talk to the API, so you're going to need the OIM lib libraries and probably some of the ext ones. And so when you include these libraries in your project, WebLogic is going to create them with the names that we have here. Okay, it doesn't really care about the location of it, okay, because the location is in that XML file. So technically you could copy those XML files and change those paths to be anything you want it to be on your machine, because when you check out this project from CVS, if somebody had already created it with this name and you have that same name defined in Netbeans, it'll work. It doesn't matter where these actually exist. So the trick in order to have like developer compatibility is to make sure that we all use these same library names. That's the key to making this all work. So the easiest way to do it is to have like that whole Java lib and all those XML files up on a download server somewhere, and then when a new developer comes in, it's, we'll go down here, get Netbeans 691 off of our server, pull Java libs off of our server, watch this video, and you're ready to go. Okay, so the next video we're going to talk about actually setting up a, basically coding up a dummy connector in Netbeans and using these libraries and tying it together, and then creating the jar file for it. Okay, see ya.